How much do we believe in the beef cattle story webinar? Today, we are very fortunate to have Joan Ruskamp and Brett Morris with us. They'll be telling their story in a little bit, but first, we need to think about the issue of antimicrobial resistance in beef cattle and livestock, and that's been kind of on the forefront of a lot of people's minds lately. You see it in the consumer side. Restaurants are basing decisions on supply on antimicrobial stewardship programs. When it comes down to discussions about that, today we're going to take the opportunity to talk to two leading producers and leading thought people in the antimicrobial resistance space from the producer side. And so I want to start out by saying, 5, 10, 2 years ago, these conversations wouldn't have been happening. This is all relatively new in the big picture. But if we look at a One Health perspective, and One Health is the healthy people, healthy animals, healthy environment, there is no one in the United States that epitomizes that more than the livestock producer and farmer. And so today we're very fortunate to have this program funded by Beef Checkoff with NIAA, National Institute for Animal Agriculture, leading the charge and getting these in place. Brief thought about NIAA, National Institute for Animal Agriculture, has been working with Beef Checkoff for numerous years and it actually hosted 8 symposiums having this conversation around antimicrobial resistance. And so since 2012, they've been working to promote the One Health concept. Both Brett and Joan that are joining us today have participated with those in the past and have acted as experts on our panels. So today we're going to move forward and talk to Joan Ruskamp of Nebraska and Brett Morris of Oklahoma. Both have served on the Cattlemen's Beef Board, and they're going to share their aha moments, how they transitioned from on this topic from being in the dark to really joining and engaging in the conversation. And so with that, I want to build on the One Health message and what we've talked about in the past and really start with you, Joan. You've been involved with the Antibiotics Symposium. You've been to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta and met with them and have really engaged that One Health concept and taken it back to your feed yard. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
We've been here on this farm since 1981 when we got married, and really have used antibiotics as a tool in our feed yard. And I didn't realize how much of a tool it is until I was asked to come and be on the panel and share the story of our feed yard with the FDA, CDC, veterinarians, and researchers in Kansas last year. And when I shared my story, I talked about everything we do in the feed yard to prevent illness. And I never even talked about the use of antibiotics. And I didn't know it until the moderator, when I was done, said she didn't even mention the use of antibiotics. And I think that just goes to show on the beef side, through a lot of things that we've implemented over the years, our focus has really been on prevention, whether it's vaccines or the antibiotics that we're using, working with our veterinarians, the BQA program. All of those pieces have come together to help us be better on our farms and ranches. I had some distrust when the conversation started happening about taking tools from us away, such as the use of antibiotics. The perception being that maybe we were the cause of antimicrobial resistance. And so I was a little apprehensive in being with the group that we were at and going to the CDC. But what I found was a lot of interest and openness in gathering us together in one community to talk together about use of antibiotics in human and animal health and management of disease, control of illnesses and things like that. And so the aha for me was really that the group wants to work together, not point fingers at each other. And sometimes we're so used to people pointing fingers that we just automatically distrust anyone outside of our own community or our own segment. And so that was really important. And then bringing us all together, for me, I like word pictures. For me, the wagon wheel really speaks to me and how that works, and that we're many spokes, but we are focused all together from my farm in Nebraska to farms and ranches across the country, to every mom and dad with little kids taking their child to the doctor for an ear infection, the researchers, the disease control center. We're all connected in managing how we use antibiotics so that we can reduce or at least really manage antimicrobial resistance for the future of our health for animals and people, and then how that impacts our environment. And so really that whole spoke, that One Health is that rim around, we're all those pieces that go out together, and One Health is that message in the middle that we're doing it for the good of all.
Great. Looking at that, Joan, you might touch on a little bit of that story you told in Kansas City when the life cycle of the beef animal that you oversee. I mean, we know that every day you get up, the first thing you got to take care of is the livestock. They're a priority. And some of those things that we discussed about, you know, those tools that you have in your toolbox and how you take care of the animals.
Right. And really, this is a charge to all of us in the beef side of this. We have cattle, but we are raising food no matter which segment we're in. At the end of the day, this is all about the beef we produce. And so the vaccinations we use, the protocols we have with our veterinarians, those are critical to help us do the best job we can. And so it's not just the feedlot's job to make sure we're not having antimicrobial resistance. It's not just the cow-calf guy. It's everybody from the day that calf is born until the day it goes to the packing plant. We're all part of that, making sure we're being responsible and we're managing. You know, we know weather happens. That's probably the biggest factor for most of us is the management of weather. And so the things that we use on our farms and ranches to minimize the impact of weather. That's probably where I showed more of the pictures, the way we use windbreaks. Today we've got shades and water misters because we've got heat and humidity and no wind. And so helping them understand our story. Most people don't get it, but when they do see it, they're like, you know, telling them how we use antibiotics too. You have nothing to hide. You're being transparent with us. We appreciate that.
And so do you think from a consumer standpoint, because part of what puts you in that angst before you went into that meeting is a lot of the media around antimicrobial resistance, a lot of the stories we hear in public and out of the general press, general media, always putting out there about superbugs and what they're going to do. You know, the CDC put out in 2013 about 23,000 deaths a year. They say it's going to skyrocket over time. But if we really think about what you need to get across to consumers, what you think they don't understand, you've touched on a little bit, but could you focus down on what consumers need to hear from Joan from Nebraska?
I have nothing to hide. And so if you give me a few minutes to share the story of what we do on our farm and how we care for the cattle that will eventually become food on your plate, I would love to share the story, including how we use antibiotics as just one tool to make sure our cattle can be healthy and thrive while they're here. Not just survive, but thrive while they're here.
Great. And Brett, you're down in Oklahoma. You've got a little different experience with both dairies and beef cattle and a little everything. And what was your aha moment, or how did you come about your transition in this discussion?
I think the biggest aha moment I had was some conversations after we gave our presentation as to how the experts in the field that they are in probably didn't come to realize that we did everything we could to prevent using antibiotics. You know, everything from when the calf is born to vaccinating, and I'm going to touch on areas of dairy and beef. But vaccination programs, checking those cattle every time of day you can, whenever you have the opportunity to, working with your vet. I don't think that they realize that we go through the measures that we do to prevent using antibiotics, because as Joan mentioned, we use it as a management tool, and that management tool can be an expensive tool when it comes to the bottom line for making progress in your beef production or dairy production and just the bottom dollar line.
Great. So we have both Joan and Brett here talking about how to care for the animals, and why doesn't that story resonate? What do producers not want to hear about antibiotic resistance, or what do they need to say? I mean, you mentioned I've nothing to hide, Joan. Brett, where are you at with that?
Well, the one thing the beef producer does not want to hear, or the dairy producer, is that we're going to restrict you from using antibiotics. You know, we look at these animals as our family, and consumers will have family members also, and you know, they're going to do everything that they can to protect their children, their parents, their grandparents, whatever. And it's going to come to resort to where, you know, we've got to go to the doctor, and then same place on the beef and dairy producers, we seek advice from our veterinarians and take their advice and use that, you know, strictly by label usage. And so, you know, the best way I can describe that is these cattle are like our family, just like family members would be to a family on the consumer side. So we're going to take care of them the best way we can and use the best practices we can to even prevent trying to use them.
Part of it, I think, is fear. Fear of having to take blame for something that we don't believe we own entirely by ourselves. We know there's areas we can keep improving in, but sometimes it seems like the fingers just want to point to one segment or one part of health management. And to say on the health of animals and people, we all have work to do. And so how can we do that most effectively? By working together to find solutions.
You bet. And so one probably big moment was when you went to CDC and sat down with the officials and the scientists at CDC, and they had no idea about the story. But so we know we've had an impact on them, but what do you think your biggest surprise was walking through CDC from the perspective of a producer and dealing with antimicrobial resistance?
They really care. You know, their moms and dads and grandmas, grandpas, whatever, and they might not live on the farm, so they don't know the story, but they really care that I do well also, that we can have the tools that we need on our farm to take care of animals. And so their focus is really on managing disease outbreaks if they occur, being able to trace something to prevent it from spreading any further than it has to, but really overall, that one health of everybody. So we've got healthy animals, healthy people, and healthy planet. So really, that openness to us as producers, that we care about you. We're not here to point fingers at you and blame you. We want to work with you. We want to learn your story. We want to know how we can bring you in to this discussion to make it better.
And I absolutely agree with Joan. Communication has got to be the opening to everything. We need to collaborate with those people. They need to give us their ideas and their thoughts, let us know how they're doing things. And also we need to convey what we do on our practices at home. But, you know, there's a settlement to a lot of problems in the world, and it all comes back to communication. Everybody's got to communicate. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. So if we look at how you have transformed in this conversation, have you transformed the way you communicate? What would be the take homes you would give your fellow producers out there, the advice you would give them to help them engage in this conversation, engage in the topic?
I would just say that's specifically the point, they need to get engaged. They need to get out there, open their eyes, see what's going on. Be willing to go to the consumer and talk to them about how, you know, they do their practice at home to provide and produce a healthy, nutritious product, whether it be beef or milk. And we just, communication, collaboration, that was a big takeaway I took from the symposium also is we've got that group of people there. I would like to have seen a lot more producers there just to experience what Joan and I did at that function. And it all comes down to communication and telling your story back on both sides of the table.
So for the producer part of it, because what Brett's challenge was to engage and be collaborative is key. But what I need to do as a producer is first accept responsibility for what I do on my farm or ranch. I am responsible for how I use antibiotics here on our farm. And knowing that it's a tool and not a crutch is extremely important. And so as producers, we have to continually analyze and review our own protocols, work with our veterinarians and say, what are we doing here so that we're mitigating and neutralizing the impact of antibiotic use on resistance? Because we don't need to find ourselves in the place where we can't use the good antibiotics we have because of how we're using them. And so it's an ongoing, I think, self-evaluation of how do I accept responsibility first for what I'm doing, challenge my producer friends to do the same, and then build on it and be engaged and be collaborative in the discussion.
Well, that makes sense. And so if you look at the collaboration and you look at that communication, I think both you did, the number of tools that are out there to use your veterinarian. You know, there's organizations like NCBA, there's programs funded by Beef Checkoff that address the situation. There's National Institute for Animal Ag that's working on building the collaboration and conversation. So, I mean, if you had to pick at the top 3 tools or top 3 things, or if you're talking to your neighbor out there and you said, okay, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, what would they be? Where would you tell them to reach out to?
First off, I think that I would tell them step 1 would be reach out to your veterinarian and have that conversation with him and develop a really good relationship with your veterinarian. Step 2 would be for beef producers is to get very involved in beef quality assurance, be certified by beef quality assurance. There's lots of things outlined there that the Beef Checkoff is funded through that's really helpful to producers and veterinarians as far as that goes. But you know, those are the 2 main steps I would take, and I think would be very beneficial to producers.
And then maybe as a possible third step would be to stay engaged in ongoing learning opportunities. And so BQA is an exceptional program. There's a lot of other learning opportunities that you can go to. The conventions have learning stations, and pharmaceutical companies will often host events where they're teaching you about how a certain product they have works. And so just taking advantage of any through your local extension service as well. There's an unlimited number of learning opportunities. Look for webinars. Go on YouTube and see what contractors like NCBA have out there for ongoing learning. I think that's something we can continue to improve on the beef side. But to always hold each other accountable. That's part of that ongoing learning and holding each other accountable.
If we go back and look at the One Health aspect again, because that's a big part of what we're doing. And if you're talking to people that don't know the industry, don't know our process, what would you tell them about our impact on the environment as that third leg of the One Health story?
Well, I would say we aren't only thinking about this set of calves that we are bringing into our farm, but we're thinking about next year and the year after and the year after, because the environment we live in sustains us and nourishes us. And so by thinking about the impact we have on the environment around us, we are trying to build it to be stronger and better for the future. And so this isn't just I want to do this now kind of mentality. This is, I'm in this for the long haul, the long term, for years or generations to come. And so the impact on the environment is critical to making sure everything we do benefits, it's right for the animal, it's right for people, and it's right for the environment around us.
I totally agree. Sustainability, what we do in our farms today, soil conservation, soil health, we're doing that for our families to pass it down through the generations, because, generations of farmers nowadays are short-lived. We're getting second and third generations departed from our roots that were back at the farm to start with. So, we've got to sustain that environment to the best of our ability, do all the practices we can. And plus, if we don't do that, we're held accountable for what we do. If we overstep the line, the accident happens, you're still held accountable. It's your responsibility. And, we're going to suffer, in some cases, we could suffer monetary penalties for what we do if we don't do the right thing. But it's in our nature to do it right to start with. And we do everything, go out of our way to make it right, make that healthy environment for the soil and the water.
I think one of the biggest growing features in a lot of our land-grant universities is ag technology. And I really don't think a lot of people understand the extent of technology that both of you use in your day-to-day operations. I mean, if we look at vaccine development, if we look at disease monitoring, soil sampling, field mapping, you can walk down to anything we use on a daily basis. Maybe touch on some of those technologies that you have available and that you're using that are making us better stewards of the land. Well,
the several you just mentioned also require that we hire a nutrient manager. We hire a veterinarian to help us work with protocols. We hire a crop consultant to help us manage the crops we grow and the soil health. We aren't experts in everything, and so we need, in order to use the tools, and there's so many, to list them all for everybody, and they're different on different operations, but we all do need the input of experts to help us make the best decisions. And so no longer can Steve and Joan just make all the decisions without any input. We need expertise feeding into us from all different angles. It's like those cell phone commercials where there's a guy standing there and he's got all these people around him. We're kind of like that on our farms and ranches. We just have this whole team of people. They're invisible to the consumer. But for us, they're critical to help us doing a really great job and providing a safe, healthy product with and a positive impact to the environment around us.
Some of the technology we use, because we also own a fertilizer business, is GPS on our equipment that we apply fertilizers with, and more so our business, just fertilizer. But technologies like that, technology we also use, I use quite a bit right from the iPhone, is our Mesonet. We can get humidity, wind speeds, temperature, heat indexes, cow comfort zone on the index from the Mesonet. It's just all kinds of tools like that there's just about anything you can't do without an iPhone nowadays. So we use that technology quite a bit. Herd management tools that we use in technology. I know that whenever I had the dairy 3 years ago, for several years, being a member of DHIA, we had a PC DART program where we would input all of our feed costs, all of our milk production, milk weights, fat percentage, protein, somatic cell count, and that in turn would give us a printout to where we could manage our herd and decide which cows are profitable and which ones are not. So there's all kinds of new technology coming out that a lot of old timers probably won't grab a hold of, but the newer generation has definitely got it in their hip pocket and they're going to use it.
One of the things that's important to me, especially when we're visiting with consumers about what we do, is that we have a lot of great technology available. It's still people at the end of the day. There's people interacting with animals, with plants. And so just because we have this great technology does not remove people from interacting on a day-to-day basis throughout the day with livestock, with what's happening out in our crops and grass fields. So I think that's still important that there's that understanding that we are still, as people, a big part of what happens.
Absolutely. I think what that kind of is, that melding or that marriage of technology and people, because I know the things you mentioned, Brett, actually give us better understanding of our cow comfort, where they're at. It gives us other metrics to measure it by, as opposed to just standards looking at them like we do every day. We know that you could walk out and pick a sick calf out, or a cow that was a little bit off in a heartbeat. But we also have another set of metrics to say, hey, we know that because we see it with our technology we use as well. So those are all critical to our success and what we do. I think another action that we look at, or you mentioned BQA, you mentioned a bunch of other practices that we do. What do you think we need to ask for as an industry, as producers, questions we need to answer, or information we need to get, or anything along those lines? You know, if we have a wish list of we want to address this problem, what do we need to be asking for?
One thing I would say was, from a producer standpoint, we should have more BQA certifications. There's a lot out there now, but there's a lot that haven't taken that certification, and it's pretty easy to do. You can do it online. I think another thing that we need to do that I thought of here recently was, you know, a lot of civic groups in towns. We need to get engaged with those people to kind of give them an idea and educate them how we do things out on the farm. There's just a multitude of things that I think needs to be done. Some of them are going to be hard to get done, but it all comes back to the core strategy I was talking about a while ago, is communication. We've got to make communication clear.
I would like to challenge all of our pharmaceutical companies to, because I hate to put all the weight on our veterinarians for BQA, and that's really who carries a lot of the weight of it in our area. But I would love to see more ongoing sessions where they're coming out and in a 2-hour over lunch, 11 to 1 o'clock, because you can pull people from farms and ranches for a couple hours. You can pull everybody. If you have something for half a day or a whole day, you're missing people because someone's got to stay and do the work. But 2-hour lunch sessions where they get to eat lunch and they get to learn, okay, this is how when a calf gets pneumonia, this is what happens. And we could hear this every 2 or 3 years. This does not get old. And you bring new people in all the time who don't have that understanding. What happens when I give this calf a shot? What happens in the animal? What happens if I miss, you know, just looking at cattle for a day and there's a sick one? What is that disease doing in that animal, and how does it impact? I think we just need more from our BQA. Then I love online certification because I can keep renewing it and it's very simple. I feel like we're missing the boat a little in making sure everyone's doing everything correctly. And then if we can get the veterinarian in the area there so that folks who don't have that relationship yet have a chance to say, hey, I'm Joan. We haven't met yet. You know, I feed about 100 calves, and so I don't see you very often, but I just want you to know, here I am. And is there anything you'd like to tell me about that you think would help my operation or help me be a better calf manager? I would put that challenge out because I love BQA. I just don't think it goes far enough, and we could have more partners with that.
Well, great. I think those are all great points and great issues going forward. I know things are changing in the AMLOC world. We think back to when the VFD was instituted, you know, guidance for industry 213 by FDA. They now have their 5-year plan. We're 2 years into their 5-year plan and removing all over-the-counter antibiotics and moving them under the supervision of a veterinarian. So those relationships are very important and going to be critical going forward. It truly has been an honor and pleasure speaking with both of you today. Any closing comments before we wrap up?
I would just like to highlight the fact that if I could relay the message on to consumer that we use that as a management tool. Like I said previously, it's a management tool when we're going to treat our animals just like we would treat just any family member like a consumer would. Some practices, that are always continually evolving. I learned the other day, I was talking to a manager of a feedlot at Oklahoma State University, and I don't know that this is kind of on the forefront now, but I know that some technology that's coming forward that would be very critical in antibiotic uses. He was explaining to me how they were researching where along chute side, whenever they were receiving cattle, that they could take like a sample of a blood, kind of like a finger prick or something, and they had a machine that they would swipe it on, and have a machine there that they could put this little sample of blood into, and it would actually count the white blood cells, so they would know whether that animal was maybe coming down with something, whether it was sick, and it would give them a protocol right then whether to administer an antibiotic to that animal or not. Just like you said, some animals, Joan and I would easily be able to go out in the pen and find what is sick, but these ones that are kind of subclinical, that you don't see, that's not giving you real physical symptoms of what's going on, but that's a technology that would eliminate a lot of antibiotic use, especially on receiving cattle. And I had never heard of that, and I kind of take that was something kind of on the front line, but that would be a great new management tool and technology to use. Producers, they're not going to use antibiotics at random. I mean, it's a cost to them, it's a cost to their bottom line. They're going to use it when they need it, they're going to use it as a management tool, and they're only doing that to better the health of that animal and also make a healthier product in the end. As far as our water and soils on our land, we are conservative stewards of the land and the water. We do everything we can to make the health of the water and the soil sustainable to pass on to the next generations down the line. And consumers need to kind of put themselves in our shoes. It's like I've talked about previously, that we're not going to treat those animals just because we think they need to be treated. We're going to treat those animals because we're going to do it on the advice of the advice of a veterinarian, just the same way as they would take the advice of a doctor if one of their family members got sick or ill and had to go to the doctor. So it all rolls around collaborative communication between all specs of One Health. So we've all got to talk together, make this world a healthier world with all the practices at each side of this wheel and spoke that Joan had talked about. So that's kind of my feeling of where we need to go with this.
Great, thanks, Brett. Joan?
Well, for our beef producers, I would just have us remember we started BQA, beef quality, before the consumer or there were any pressures from the outside coming in about what we were doing. And so I think that says a lot, as Brett mentioned, about our dedication as farmers and ranchers to what we do. We're striving to use less resources and providing food, in our case beef, and have those resources be replenished for future years and generations to also be able to continue what we're doing right now. And so kudos to the beef community for already implementing and starting this program, because we're so concerned about beef quality. Now, how do we keep it going? Well, do you believe in the story you are part of? If you believe in the story, then you need to start talking about it. Is there a camera running on you all the time that you'd be happy to share on Twitter? Are we always doing the right thing? Mother Nature aside, because she throws things at us that cause us to do things, like maybe mass treat because the cattle went through a lot of stress to get here. Those are the unusual moments. I'm talking about day to day, how we behave, how we treat our animals, the people around us, the planet that we've been given to take care of. are we willing to share that, and do we believe in it? And if there's anything that we feel uncomfortable about, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it with our veterinarians, and let's stay part of the conversation. Because if we don't get to be part of the conversation with our friends at CDC and the FDA, human doctors, our DVMs, when we all get to be together to talk about it, they get to see our challenges. They don't know what it's like to get calves from Kentucky to Nebraska when they've gone through a horrible rainstorm there, got delayed, and then came into a blizzard here. They don't know any of that story. And so for me to explain, well, then in that case, I might have to use antibiotics for every animal on arrival because I know they're extremely stressed and the odds of them breaking down because my veterinarian tells me this are really high. And so when we're able to connect with them in the use of those extraordinary measures that we sometimes have to do, they get it. They're not going to be like, oh, now we got you. It's not that. It's not about getting you. It's about working together and seeing ourselves as part of this overall picture that we are in the story. And if we're willing to collaborate, that's a word that Brett's used over and over very effectively. We have to think about our grandchildren and great-grandchildren as well, and including ourselves as we age, that we have the antibiotics that we'll need to be healthy and strong and recover from any illnesses.
Yeah, those are great points, and that's been part of the goal of the National Institute for Animal Agriculture since 2012, coming up on nearly a decade, trying to communicate and collaborate on the subject of antimicrobial resistance. And you guys have been involved in that. You understand what happens and what the challenges are, and those challenges continue in communicating. And one thing that we at NIA are trying to do with the help and funding of the Beef Checkoff is to get these stories out there and encourage other people to tell their story as well, because it's kind of the unheard mass out there, that the 2% that are involved in animal agriculture, they're feeding the world, that don't get a chance to get on stage too often. So with that said, it's a great opportunity for producers, consumers, whoever wants to be engaged in the conversation to attend one of these symposiums. In October 15th through the 17th, the National Institute for Animal Ag is hosting communicating the science of responsible antibiotic use in agriculture at Ames, Iowa, in conjunction with the National Institute of Antimicrobial Resistance Research and Education. So it's an opportunity, like you both mentioned, to get out there and tell your message and have the chance to learn how to communicate it. I think one of the big things we see is that producers are scared to step out there. They're scared to get out and tell their story for fear that they'll be accused of something, not understanding that they're actually standing on very solid ground. They're doing things right. And once you tell that story, as Joan and Brett, you both experienced talking to CDC, FDA, they just need to understand. And so going forward, I would encourage all producers out there to take the path that Joan and Brett have done and step up and engage in the conversation and collaborate and communicate through their work through both Beef Checkoff and in their own individual communities. So with that, I would say thank you again for your time. We've enjoyed hearing your story. And encourage anyone else to participate.